And I didn't want to just do, okay, did the main character in that specific franchise live or die, because those are your odds, because that's boring. And also because I don't want to talk about it. Hi, welcome back to Gracie Talks. This is Gracie. For those of you who don't know, my first video was a full recap of The Mortal Instrument, City of Bones, written by Cassandra Clare. It's a 3-hour-long video that took me a really long time. I am almost done with the second one right now, so that will actually be the next video that I post. But while I'm finishing that one up, I wanted to do sort of a get to know me video. I thought that a fun way to do it would be get to know me through different fandoms, because we're going to talk about a lot of things on this channel. We're going to talk about movies, TV shows, books. We're going to talk about pop culture. Someone needs to tell me how to feel about Thank You, Amy, by the way. I understand all of the context. I understand it's complicated. How do we feel about it? So I want to talk about a lot of different things on this channel, and I figured that this could be a good sort of segue into that. We could touch on a lot of fandoms. Some of the things we're going to have to talk about on this channel are going to be the major franchises, right? We're going to have to talk Twilight, Hunger Games, Harry Potter, Divergent. We're going to have to talk about pretty much all of these major franchises. Obviously, I read all of these books when I was younger, when they were first coming out. I was always so delusional and convinced that I would have survived in that world. So I figured, since I really liked doing deep dives, what if we did a deep dive by sorting them all into different genres and then trying to look at what the chances are that someone actually would have survived that if you were just plopped in. So not even me specifically, but just all of us, right? Any one of us. What are your actual chances? Initially, I was looking at the post-apocalyptic movies specifically because I always wanted to live in a post-apocalyptic world. I don't mean that to sound scary. I mean, we're in late-stage capitalism in the US, so you tell me what's going to happen to us. I don't know. I was always convinced that I wanted to live in one of those worlds. So I was looking at the post-apocalyptic books, and then I ended up moving more towards the dystopian books. Post-apocalyptic and dystopian sometimes get used interchangeably. They do technically mean different things, and I'm sorry, that's what we're here to do. So for this one specifically, we are going to be looking at Hunger Games, Maze Runner, and Divergent. These are the main ones that I wanted to discuss as we sort of make our way talking about some of the biggest fandoms of the 2000s. And then we could do one on the post-apocalyptic genre. We could do one on the vampire genre, Twilight, Vampire Diaries, Vampire Academy. You're dropped into it. What are your actual chances that you're going to survive? I should note, by the way, that my first idea for this video, I knew I wanted to do some sort of a get to know me, but with a spin on it. And my first thought was I should do get to know me through my shipping history. And I would go through all of the main fandoms that I was in and give my main ship, and then my, as I call them, my don't look over here ships. So the ships that wouldn't actually ever get together, but either there was just really good chemistry with the actors or even reading the books, I was just like, So those are called my don't look over here ships. And I thought about doing that for a get to know me, but honestly, it was just too scary because you have to remember, I was on Tumblr. The shipping wars, not something to joke about. Not something to make your he's and your ha's about, okay? So we're going to do this. So talking about these three, I wanted to rank them in terms of which one would you actually have wanted to live in, which one would you have the highest chance of survival in. There are a couple different approaches that we'll take. The first one is the broadest approach. By the way, spoilers. Spoiler alert for all of these books. We're going to be talking about everything, including the prequel for Hunger Games. This approach is going to be based off of the books for each series, and it's going to look at how many total characters were there in the book, and then how many of them were still alive at the end of the book series. This is a very reductive brute force method, I would say. Just looking at the stats, how many characters were there, how many made it, that's your chances of surviving. There are a lot of issues with this metric. I do not like it as a mathematician because 1, incomplete information, 2, sampling bias. We'll talk about that with Divergent more. It's just really not a good method. However, it is the only method that we have for comparing all three in more of an apples to apples comparison. So we're going to start with this one. Also, if you do look at it as you're just dropped into this book now, what are the chances that you make it? This would actually be an accurate depiction of that. So I'm criticizing this approach, but this approach is not without merit. Remember, the whole point of this is that I wanted so badly to be the characters in these books. I will say right off the bat, Hunger Games, Divergent, Maze Runner, Divergent. I wanted to be Divergent so bad. The first time I saw that movie, I saw the movie before I had read the books. Don't know how I missed them. Loved the movie so much. Then saw it multiple times in theater. I'm in high school at this point. I ended up flying to Chicago for a birthday trip. I'm seeing the trains go by. I'm looking around. I'm like, ooh, we went to Navy Pier. It was so cool. I listened to so much Ellie Goulding that weekend. Fantastic soundtrack. Also love it. I remember taking the train and thinking, I'm basically dauntless right now. I was convinced that I would have been dauntless and that I would have survived in this world. Delusion. Also, in terms of these dystopian franchises, Divergent wasn't that bad to me. Some of the factions were incredibly boring or just massive bummers, but Dauntless seemed like so much fun. Just parkouring everywhere, running around, wood kids always playing in the background. I don't know. I liked it. Hunger Games, I loved those books. I loved those movies. I didn't really actually ever want to be in that book reading it though. It pretty much seemed like a bummer start to finish, no matter where you were. I did think that I probably would have survived in that world, but definitely not the Hunger Games. Absolutely not the Hunger Games. Would not have won. Also, this is so funny. And this is why it's so fun to do stuff like this, because I'm just remembering now that the first date that I ever went on, I couldn't even drive yet. The first date that I went on was to see the Hunger Games movie. I got dropped off at the frozen yogurt place. We had frozen yogurt and then we walked to the movie theater and we saw this movie. And I remember thinking the whole time, like, oh my God, is he gonna hold my hand? He didn't. Hunger Games is also deeply a part of my lore, I would say, just like TMI. I mean, all of these franchises are really. This is why I really wanted to talk about Hunger Games and Divergent. These are also two of my favorite franchises, and I have not gone back and reread them. So I'm coming at this with just the information that's up here from before, and then also some stats, but we'll talk about that as we get into it. The last franchise that we're going to talk about is Maze Runner. Interestingly enough, Dylan O'Brien is one of my favorite actors of all time. Teen Wolf is one of my favorite shows. The Maze Runner franchise just kind of missed me. I don't know how. I don't know where I was. I don't know what I was doing. I did not read the books. I did watch the movie to support Dylan O'Brien. Very confused. So we're not going to go that in depth on the Maze Runner in this video. But to all of the really big Maze Runner fans out there, I'm so sorry. And I did do the research that I would need to do to be able to talk about this. Approach number 1, character count only, starting with Hunger Games, 30%. Low. Lower than I thought it would be. I knew it would be low because of the Hunger Games, but I kind of figured that as long as you're not a tribute, you're going to be kind of okay, even though I know that they had some deaths in the wars. But no, 30% survivability rate. Divergent, 80%. And I'll tell you why this was weird to me. Because Divergent obviously had a very big death. I already gave a spoiler alert, but it still feels kind of wrong to spoil this if anybody's going to read it. It had a massive death in terms of importance. And so I think in my head it says, oh, because that death was such a big deal, it must have been a really death-heavy book. It wasn't. 80% chance of surviving. If you do this dauntless only, 29%. So that's where a lot of the deaths are hiding, which makes sense, but this is also where we get into sampling bias because Triss obviously becomes a dauntless. All of her friends are dauntless then as she sort of moves on. They do go around to all of the other factions, but for the most part, the main people that you're seeing are going to be mostly dauntless, so they're obviously going to have more deaths. But anyway, 80% overall. Not bad. The issue with that is that if I was going to be a part of that book, a part of that world, I only would have been a dauntless. I wouldn't have been anything else. So I would have been looking at that cute 29%. Maze Runner characters only, 40%. That lets me know that there were some decent stakes in that book. I got information mostly from the wiki fandom pages for all of this, and then a couple of other places. I'm going to have all of my sources listed below. So I should say I did not reread the books and verify the information that I got from Fandom Wiki, because I can't read 20 books right now on top of trying to do the TMI videos. I trusted the data that was there. I will have all of the sources below. Also, if you're wondering where the wall is, we moved, actually. I had finished filming the second video, took everything down, and I'm going to have to rebuild everything for the third one. And it genuinely brings me to tears if I think about it too much. This is the new place. It's still just me and a white wall. Welcome. This broad approach, overall survivability rate, we have to talk about the biggest risk. What are the biggest risks of being in each of these worlds? I'm approaching this from a standpoint of what are your physical needs? Water, air, sleep, food. Hunger Games, your biggest risk is going to be being reaped, being chosen to be a tribute in the Hunger Games. That's going to be the most dangerous one, but not the most likely, as we'll get into. Overall, I think you're looking at food scarcity, violence, war, the normal. Divergent, biggest risk, yeah, the war that's breaking out. Also air quality and water quality, potentially, but there's a solution to that. One of the main risks I think about Divergent is your exposure to Shio. And I should explain. Shio was an actor pairing that people shipped online that referred to Shailene Woodley and Theo James. Let me make myself clear. I love Shailene Woodley. I love Theo James. I think both of them are great actors, and I loved them in that movie. Say what you will about that movie franchise and the cursed fourth film that never got made. But the Shio of it all, people went so feral for Shio online. Quick context on this. By and large, it is not encouraged online to ship the actual actors who would portray a ship because people have partners. The fans feel like it's disrespectful. I never shipped actual actors. I never actually shipped Shailene and Theo, but I'm human. I would see all the Shio content and it was just so charming. Their chemistry was so good. Do I think that they had something? No, he's married with a kid. I think he was dating her at the time. I want to be appropriate and respectful. But just the chemistry was so palpable. They were cast so well. And I genuinely think that they're such good friends. I mean, they still hang out occasionally. I just think their chemistry was so crazy. So that's the Shio risk, right? Is just being constantly assaulted with what looks like genuine love and care between two friends who respect each other. And at that time in my life, that felt like a personal attack. Shio was also kind of controversial because everyone said, oh, they're fake dating for the movies. I have such a bone to pick with that. They never claimed to be dating. Everyone would talk about how they would show up to premieres and they'd be holding hands and they kept hugging each other. I genuinely just thought that they were two very good friends who were very close and working on this movie. They never claimed to be dating. People would even ask them about it in interviews and they would always say, oh no, everybody has partners. We're just really good friends. And they get a lot of flack for that. I saw people talking about the Sydney Sweeney, Glenn Powell situation. And all in the comments, they were like, the worst case that I saw was Shailene Woodley and Theo James. They never fake dated. Okay, I'm just going to clear their name on that real quick. I also thought about doing a video on the love interest of fake dating or real dating pipeline. So their portrayal of love changed me. Maze Runner, I think just the monsters. So I think the risks with Maze Runner are just going to be the maze. I think that's going to be an issue. Monsters, potentially food scarcity. And then I only saw the first movie and did not read any of the books, but I'm assuming that there's going to be a rebel group led by the charming and unassuming yet brave Dylan O'Brien that fights the dystopian government, causing some sort of civil war, much like the other franchises. So I would say war is going to be one of the biggest risks. Okay, overall survivability based on this first metric. You're going to want to be in Divergent. That's the series you're going to want to go into. You're going to want to avoid Dauntless. I say sit in Amity. They probably have horse therapy there, stuff like that. You can hang out with animals and nature. Abnegation would also be very conflict averse, so that could be a good place to hang out, but honestly does not seem as much fun. And for people like me, they would take one look at my lash extensions and my nail tips and say, you're not welcome here. It's not a real option for us. Secondly, you're going to want to put yourself in the Maze Runner world, and I would just say avoid any of the main characters. Avoid any plucky 16-year-olds that seem like they're the chosen one. Avoid the war, all of that. And then lastly, you should only go into the Hunger Games world if it's your only option. This leads us to our second approach. What are your chances of surviving in this world if you are the main character? Because the whole point of this to me in my thought process was that I always wanted to be in these books growing up, but I always would have been the main character in my head. This approach served fruitless, as you can imagine, because how do you actually quantify survivability with a lot of these things? It's too vague, it's too nebulous, too many variables, too many different ways to break them down. And I didn't want to just do, okay, did the main character in that specific franchise live or die, because those are your odds, because that's boring. And also because I don't want to talk about it. So when I was looking at ways to quantify this, I said, you know what? I don't think that this is going to work. But then I found a complete data set for every victor of the Hunger Games. And I said, oh, tingling. I'm tingling. What do we have here? This was posted on hungergamestales.fandom.com. I have already disclosed that I did not reread the books to verify this information. And a lot of this information, I don't really know how we have it. I don't think that it was in the books. For the purposes of this video and for the purposes of me being able to play around with data in Excel, we are going to be treating this data set as accurate. It has a couple main metrics that we're going to look at and break down. One of them is gender, and everything is given as either male or female. I understand that gender is a spectrum. I understand that it is not binary. The only information that we have is either male or female, so that's how we're going to break it down. Real quick, this channel is a safe space for everybody. Everyone is welcome here. We treat people kindly and we treat them with respect. Thank you for being here. Love to all. I'm sorry if I'm making people gag out there when my voice does that thing where you can tell that I'm being genuine. But if I was doing a real get to know me video, I would have covered that and just had to say it so that I knew that it had been said. But back to the horrific death match between tons of innocent children every year. So I found this data set, broke it down, built a bunch of graphs, and then built a model that will generate certain inputs completely at random and tell us what our percent chances of winning the Hunger Games with that makeup. Then it'll run a simulation that I made and tell us whether or not we won that specific time based on the chance that we had of winning. I've spent a really long time on this. I did all of this with macros in Excel. I cannot wait to show y'all. And this is where this video turned into what are your chances of winning the Hunger Games? This is our third and final approach. Now let's talk about even making it to the Hunger Games. What are your chances of being reaped? Using the Pan Am population of about 4.5 million and then the US Census information on age, because Pan Am is mostly comprised of the US. So you got 4.5 million people, 9% are gonna be in that age group of 12 to 18, which are your eligible years to be reaped. That would put about 414,000 in that 12 to 18-year-old group of people that would be eligible at the reaping ceremony. I'm rounding all these numbers for the video. I do have the exact numbers in my model. 24 people get picked. And listen, I know that this does not account for the fact that you can put your name in multiple times, which is a huge factor. And to that, I would say, you guys, I'm sorry. There's only so much I can do. This will not affect the calculations once we get into, okay, now you're a tribute, you're in the Hunger Games, so what are your chances of winning? This really just affects your chances of being reaped. And so for the purposes of this, we're looking at everybody has an equal chance, 414,000 people in this group, 24 people get picked. You're looking at a 0.006% chance of being reaped. Getting struck by lightning, by the way, 0.0065% chance. You are literally more likely to be struck by lightning, and I do mean literally, than you are to get picked at the reaping ceremony for the Hunger Games. So that's comforting. This would be for any individual reaping ceremony. Let's say everything stays in place. You end up having to go to the ceremonies every year from 12 to 18. Now you're looking at a 0.04% chance, still very small. Your chance of winning overall is 4.2%. This is based on one person winning out of 24 possible tributes each year. Everything that I did with the data in the model and the calculations only uses the 74 games because the 75th game was not completed. So we are only looking at the completed games. If you do account for the fact that there were 2 winners at the 74th Hunger Games, Katniss and Peeta, then you would have 75 winners. If you use 75 winners over 74 games, you actually come up with a 4.22% chance of winning. It's a little bit higher. The straight 1 in 24 chance is 4.17, so they both round to 4.2, and at this point, we're splitting hairs. But I don't believe that for the purposes of this experiment, the Capitol would ever let 2 people win again. I think you're really just looking at, okay, I'm a tribute, there are 24 people, I have to be the one person that makes it. This also doesn't account for the fact that the 10th game, cheating allegations. I love Lucy Gray Baird. She technically wouldn't have made it without the cheating. I'm not saying that I wish she hadn't made it. I'm just saying it's another thing that we're ignoring in the stats. So for the purposes of this, you have been reaped. You are a tribute. You know, your chances of winning are 1 in 24. I'm now your coach. I'm going to take you through it. Approach number 3. What are your chances of surviving the Hunger Games? The stats that we have are going to let us look at district, age, and gender. The victor percentages data, the way that you have to look at it, because these are only the stats for the victors. Given that I'm a victor, what was the probability that I was from this district or this age or this gender? So of the victors through games 1 through 74, you're going to see the highest percentages in district 1 and 2. This is not a surprise, right? Districts 1 and 2 are wealthier, have more money, also more insulated. You would be better trained, you would be healthier, all of these things. The worst districts to be from, 3, 7, and 12. 3 was a little bit surprising to me. Am I forgetting something from the books? I knew District 1 was the wealthiest, and then I assumed District 2 would have been not too far behind that, and then pretty much all the other districts. Maybe I'm forgetting about something. So I'm going to want you to be from District 1 or 2. I'm going to want you to be well-fed. I'm going to want you to be healthy. Moving on to age, this is not a surprise. You're going to want to be older. Because you're going to have to survive longer than 23 other people. The smaller and weaker those other people are, the higher your chances are. This is dark. The average age of the winners is 17, and the most victors have been 17. The youngest victors were 14. 2 were male, 2 were female. Equality, one of them, Finnick O'Dare. Nobody aged 12 or 13 has won the Hunger Games. So I'm going to need you to not be 12 or 13. Victor percentages by gender. If you can be a male, do that. Just in general, you're going to have a higher chance of not being murdered, assaulted, harassed, attacked. This breakdown is about 60-40. 60% of the winners have been male. Wherever you can be male, do that. Performance metrics now. As your coach, I think you should know what you're up against. This first one is macabre and, dare I say, a little gauche. I have lovingly named it Slay Power. It does represent how many of the other tributes each victor has been able to unlock. I'm going to take you through it because the chart's a little bit confusing with how I did this one. The stats that we have are that each victor slayed at least this many people. So if you look at it, 3 victors slayed at least 0 people that we know about. 12 victors slayed at least 1 person. 14 victors slayed at least 2 people. And then another 14 victors slayed at least 3 people. So it all adds up to 100% at the bottom. And it does go all the way to 24 because technically there are 24 tributes. That's the total amount of people that can be slayed. 57% of the victors have slayed at least 3 people. That's where I'm going to want you to be. I'm going to want you to be above that number. Maximum slay power, you're looking at 18. Guy named Septimus Panic. Sounds like a freak. You know I have to know the breakdown on this one. Female slays, 123. Male slays, 163. I was making my bullet points next to each chart for what I wanted to highlight. And I was going to make a joke saying, well, why would the female slay as much when we're only getting 75 cents to $1? And then I realized that 123 to 163 breakdown, exactly 75. These women really said, we're worth 75 cents to your dollar. We're slaying at 75% of what you're slaying at. Our second performance metric, endurance. How long do you have to last in the game? I pulled all the data for this. 7% of the games have been wrapped up within 1 day. Interestingly, most of the earlier Hunger Games were the ones that got wrapped up pretty quickly. So I don't know if the structure changed or if they just ended up introducing more hiding spots, bigger area. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. I think the first games, not a lot of places that you can hide. It sort of wrapped up pretty quickly. And the later games, you could last weeks. 28% of the games are wrapped up within 1 week, with 92% of the games being wrapped up in 2 weeks. The shortest game was less than an hour, 56 minutes. The longest game, 24 days. Now, as your coach, I'm going to want you to be ready for that full 24-hour time period. Okay, you're going to need to be able to eat, sleep, survive in the wilderness for 24 days. The majority of games, 64%, are in that 1 week to 2 week bucket. So more than 1 week, less than 2 weeks. The average length of game, 8 days, 20 hours, 22 minutes. So I'm going to want you to go in ready for 24. You just got to make it a little over a week. Now I'm going to show you the simulation. This is not meant to be a class in probability or mathematics. There is no right or wrong way to do this. This is just fun. So please don't come for me with the math and the data. I'm going to show you the spreadsheet now. This is the data for everything. I got about a 5-column table and then broke down all the information. Here are charts and percentages over here. And then this is the model. Okay, these are the formulas that are running off to the side. The information that we have is that given that I am a victor, what is the probability that I am this gender, this age, this district? And then we also have the probability of being that gender, that age, that district. So we can backdoor our way into what are the chances of me winning and being a victor, given that this is my gender, age, district. This is not for real yet, okay? This is the practice. Gender, we're male, okay? That's good. That's what we want it to be. In terms of survivability rate, we're 15. That is younger than I wanted it to be, but not impossible. If we were 12 or 13, big issues. District 7. Okay, that is the worst that it can be. 3, 7, and 12 are all equal for the worst that it can be. But we are male and we are 15. So now that we've done this, we're going to run this chance of winning, okay? And it's going to run all the calculations. Okay, 3.65%. Remember that it's a 4.2% chance of winning just based on being 1 in 24. The age being 15, the district being 7, we got pulled down from that 4.2. We have a lower likelihood on average of winning based on this makeup. All of these are macros, by the way. These buttons, all of this in Excel, they're all running everything completely randomly, going through the formulas. Chance of winning is calculated, and then we're going to run the simulation. So then the simulation is basically going to run it 100 times, pick one of those outcomes based on the odds that we have of winning, and tell us in that specific instance, did we make it or not, okay? Loser. Listen, this was the practice run. I was explaining it. We're gonna clear it. We're female this time. You know what? Girl power. 16. Okay, we're looking like Katniss. We're looking like Katniss right now. Okay, we're female, we're 16. I'm liking all of this. Oh, District 1. Y'all, well done. Oh, well done. Okay, chance of winning? 6.57%. 4.2%, is that average? 6.57%. This is strong. This is strong. Oh, I spent so much time on this. Okay. Okay. That's fine. All right, so 6.5% chance. That means every 14 to 15 times we should win based on that probability. So let's just see. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. We won at 5. So if you're a 16-year-old female from District 1 and you lose, just know that if you would only had 4 more tries, you would have made it. I'm pretty happy with that. That's a pretty strong stat. One thing that we can do and we should do, we're going to look up what Katniss's odds were. Female, she has 15, she's from District 12. She had a 4.79% chance, so still above average, but obviously not one of the highest chances that you can have going in. PETA would have been all of these things as well, except he would have been male, 5.2%. So he had a higher chance, and I think Katniss carried the team a little bit. And that's it. All of that work for that moment. Honestly, building and playing around with it for our real attempt to be victor after 5 tries and to have the metrics that we had, that was pretty strong. I'm really proud of all of us. Closing thoughts. So what was the point? Living in a dystopian world, not all that my 15-year-old brain thought that it would be cracked up to be. Overall, I think living in these dystopian worlds is just going to be too risky. So I would say I do not want to live in a dystopian world, and we have figured that out. My brain still thinks that I would want to live in a post-apocalyptic world. There's one show specifically that was post-apocalypse. It is my favorite show of all time. I wanted to live in that world so badly, and we're going to talk about it on this channel one day. We are. We could look at post-apocalyptic next. What are your chances of living in a post-apocalyptic world? Stephanie Meyers has one, The Host. I loved the movie when I saw it. It's been a very long time, potentially time to revisit that one. And then we could do the vampire worlds, but I do wonder how I would break that down. It's a little bit of the same problem. How do you mathematically calculate a lot of that stuff? Just things to think about, I guess. I'm almost done with the second Mortal Instruments video. That is going to be the next video that I post. And then I'm going to start working on the third one. If people watch, like, subscribe, all of that. And then I'll keep doing these short videos in between the big deep dives. Final thoughts. I wanted to know what book everybody said I want to be in and which one they said I definitely don't want to be in. So let me know. Let's discuss. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you soon.